Welcome to yet another edition of Deep Dive featuring Hudson Institute. I'm Jonathan Hudson, broadcast here from Jerusalem, and to deliberate Middle East intricacies, a whole variety of them with implications not only to this region but also beyond. Let's now turn to the director of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East at Hudson Institute, namely Dr. Michael Duran. It's good to see you, sir. I'd like to immediately dive deep, if I may, into a number of issues. And the first one is U.S. President Joe Biden last Friday came out and unveiled some sort of outline for a potential cessation of hostilities between Israel and the Islamist Hamas organization in the Gaza Strip, which today, and also already in the past 72 hours, various statements coming out of Jerusalem indicate that much of what he said was not necessarily accurate, and some of which was actually also false. So let's try and put things a little bit in the right track of what actually happened and how we are to look at this current state of play moving forward.
Well, thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for having me here, and thanks to the other panelists for joining. The statement was, I think, the political science term, the technical term for the statement is weird. It was very weird. Why was it weird? Because the president came out and announced an Israeli initiative. Usually the way the customary practice is for Americans to announce American initiatives, Israelis to announce Israeli initiatives. But in this case, the president announced what he said was an Israeli initiative, and he did it on Friday when the Shabbat had already begun in, I don't know what the proper verb is for Shabbat. Shabbat had arrived, fallen in Israel, so that
Shabbat is entered.
Shabbat had entered, so that Prime Minister Netanyahu could not shape the public understanding of the quote unquote Israeli initiative. And then we also learned, of course, that there was no coordination, no serious coordination between Washington and Jerusalem before the announcement. What I think is going on here, to cut to the chase, is that a lot of what President Biden said was true about what the Israeli position was, but there are a couple of key issues where there are major disagreements between the Israelis and the Americans about the quote-unquote Israeli initiative. And the biggest one is that Biden clearly wants the ceasefire, which is understood to be in stages, a three-stage process. He wants stage one to inevitably and inexorably move to stage three of a total end to the conflict. And when I say the conflict, I'm not just talking about the conflict in Gaza, but also in Lebanon. They're working a whole diplomatic process in parallel, quietly, to the negotiations in Gaza, so that once Gaza falls into place, Lebanon will fall into place as well. President Biden is also being disingenuous when he says that this will lead to a Gaza Strip in which Hamas is no longer the major political actor. The administration is they're paying lip service to the idea of a post-Hamas Gaza, but they're really planning on Hamas still having some kind of significant political presence in Gaza. There's no planning about how to get rid of them. They want to stop the war. Prime Minister Netanyahu, on the other hand, he wants to destroy Hamas as a military organization and as an organization capable of ruling Gaza or imposing its political will on Gaza. That's a significant difference of opinion about war aims, about fundamental war aims. It's being covered up with a lot of verbiage about agreement over strategic aims and agreement over process. There's a lot of disagreement underneath all of that agreement.
Thank you, Dr. Duran. Let's now turn elsewhere here in Israel to Brigadier General in Reserve Yossi Kuperwasser, formerly the Director General of the Israeli Ministry for Strategic Affairs, the head of the IDF's Intelligence Directorate's Research and Assessment Unit, and currently at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, the Director for Middle East Developments. It's good to see you, General. I'd like to ask you, not necessarily to the essence of what Dr. Duran just framed for us, but more into the viability of such a reality. Since, let's face it, to bring about the full elimination of the Islamist Hamas will take time, and this objective has not been placed aside by the current Israeli government, nor any of the parties within the War Cabinet, to include also Israeli Defense or War Cabinet Minister Gadi Eisenkot and War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz, who are not necessarily going to be part of this government in the next couple of days moving forward. But can we find a reality in which the outcome of the situation in the Gaza Strip would ultimately dictate the various interests and strategic concerns of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is seemingly driving everything else throughout this region, including when we're talking about Yemen, about Iraq, about Syria, and of course Lebanon, with an upward trajectory and hostilities taking place as we speak?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Well, everything is intertwined, and everything is impacted and influenced by what's happening in other arenas. And definitely, right from the beginning, it was clear that what's happening in Gaza is going to affect what's happening in Iran and with the Iranian proxies around the Middle East and the Iranian impact on other arenas like cooperation with Russia and China and so on and so forth. And I think that following what Michael said, that we are in a very peculiar situation. He called it weird. I would say peculiar. I think it's more or less the same thing, where the United States sides with Hamas, not intentionally, but there is a conjectural situation where there's a meeting of interest between Hamas and the United States. Both want to see the war coming to an end, where Israel says the war is not going to come to an end before we accomplish our mission and get rid of Hamas in Gaza. What President Biden said was that Hamas is going to be allowed to stay in government in Gaza. It's going to rule Gaza in the future. This is something totally unacceptable for any Israeli. Now, the reasoning behind it was that, look, Hamas is weakened by the war, and it's not going to be able to rearm itself because the situation has changed. And if you find one Israeli that believes it, tell me about it, because there's no reason to believe that this is the case. Now, the entire mission of President Biden was to sell this to the Israelis. He repeatedly was trying to convince the Israelis that this is a good deal for them. But I don't think any Israeli, including Gantz and Eisenkot, as you mentioned, is going to buy this merchandise. We understand that what's going to happen is that if we accept the roadmap that President Biden presented based on the Israeli offer to have a deal to release the hostages, but these are two separate things. The roadmap is one thing and the deal is something else. This attempt by Biden to present the deal as a part of his roadmap is misleading, because we are talking about a totally different deal, and I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu has already explained that there is a differentiation between the two things, and that the deal as presented by Biden was not the deal that he was provided by Biden and the other parties. So I don't think that this is going to work. If we are going to accept it, of course, Iran is going to become the big winner, because what's going to happen is that the plan that Hamas had right from the beginning, that it is going to conduct this kind of terrible operation like they did in October 7th and still stay in power, and this would mean a victory for Hamas, is going to transpire in a strengthening of the Iranian regime and the Iranian idea of exporting the revolution, as they call it. And we shall see more strength on behalf of Iran in the region and beyond. We shall see the repercussions are going to be felt, first of all, in my mind, in Jordan. That is the next target of the Iranians, if we saw how fragile the situation over there is. But there are other areas where this is going to have a very negative impact, and Iran is going to be somehow saved by the Americans. Now we see this attitude of the Americans in other arenas as well. We see what's happening in the IAEA Board of Governors meeting, where the Europeans want to adopt some measures against Iran because of the way the Director General of the IAEA presented the situation with Iran as the ongoing accumulation of highly enriched uranium and all of the lack of cooperation, the lack of readiness to cooperate with the IAEA. And it's the United States who's conducting all kinds of negotiations with the Iranians and trying to convince the Europeans not to impose the sanctions on Iran. This is amazing. Of course, this all plays by the American administration to improve the condition of Iran in this power play. It's really amazing, weird, peculiar, whatever you want to call it. Weird. I go back to Michael's weird. And President Biden has to explain how he plans to make sure that Iran doesn't have the upper hand in this confrontation. Right now, it is as if the Americans are trying to provide the Iranians with more and more achievements. I don't know what's the logic behind that. Now, there's a full scheme of or ideas of how this can be transpired into something better. But I don't believe any of those promises is going to materialize. It's on the contrary, if we win the war in Gaza, then there is a chance that the Saudis will move forward with called it integration, but they may move forward with integration and maybe even normalization. And if we win the war in Gaza, there is a good chance that Hezbollah in the northern front is going to be much more ready to go for some sort of diplomatic arrangement that would serve Israeli security interests. If we let Hamas to win, why would Hezbollah not ask for the skies? That's something that is very wrong with the Biden proposal.
Well, let's turn now to New York City, where we're joined by Dr. Olli Heinonen, a distinguished fellow at Stimson Center at Washington, D.C., who formerly served as the Deputy Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency. It's good to see you, Dr. Heinonen. I'd like to ask you immediately about the current meeting of the Board of Governors of the IAEA, during the course of which we heard the introductory statement by Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi. The portion that he spoke about Iran was a lot of regret, a lot of frustration, a lot of anger to a certain degree, many outstanding issues, all of them unresolved, and yet the couple of sentences mentioning some hope relate to some promises the Iranians have made about leaving some sort of window open, which they have also done in the past. It brought about more and more regret. What am I missing here?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Yes, this was a sober statement by Rafael Grossi, and I understand that for him it's also in stake is the role of the IAEA Secretariat in this business and also the Board of Governors. And I think that we are in a very unusual situation in that sense that the views in the international community are in great variance how to deal with the Iran dossier. And as a result of that, Iran feels at this point of time that it's negotiating from the strength, which actually with this, increasing uranium enrichment capabilities, stocks, God knows what they do behind the scenes, which the IAEA doesn't have any more access because of reduced declarations. Iran doesn't apply Code 3.1 of the Safeguards Agreement. Additional protocol is not implemented. So IAEA is fighting pretty much in field with one hand tied behind the back. I would not expect too much from this meeting this week, actually. And the reason is very simple. If I look, the international situation, we have there Middle East, Gaza, Iran as a whole and its activities in the Middle Eastern area. We have Ukraine, we have North Korea, and maybe a little bit Taiwan also there, even though it doesn't play too much for this one. And then I look the resolutions which the IAEA can do, or the board can do. That's the only thing what they have. We go back to the resolution of November 22. That was quite detailed. No real message to Iran other than comply. But in order to get the resolution through, you need to get majority of the states to agree on that. And if you recall, the only 2 states were against the resolution in November 22, Russia and China, important ones. But at least, they should abstain. When I look the statements of Russian government, I think there's no hope that they agree to any of the statements in the IAEA board, which will censure Iran. But at the same time, if they bring forward a statement, it has to be something which is taken seriously, which Iran understands it has to comply, and if it doesn't comply, it has consequences. Now, we are also in different situation in the sense that Iran is in the process of selecting a new president. Certainly, it will come from the same mind thinking as the previous one. So I don't think we should expect huge surprise. So the caravan goes on in Iran. But there are 2 important things I see there. And one is that Mr. Shamhani is back in the picture with this file. And we have to remember his role in nuclear dossier. He was one of the guys who set up or endorsed the nuclear program in mid-80s. So he has been in this business all along on all decisions with Iran did in 1980s, early 90s, 2000s, in terms of developing capabilities, financing them, getting foreign support, and then as a face to the international community when he was the Secretary General of the National Security Council. So he knows this file, and he has very strong opinions, as we see in the public. And the other important factor is that Mr. Bagheri, who is now the acting foreign minister, he's actually been a pen holder towards the international community, particularly on the political level in negotiations. So they have the continuity, but unfortunately we have to now wait perhaps another month and then the IAEA can go forward. But what I think that the IAEA member states should do, endorse the agency's secretariat's activities much wider than what it has been doing. These meetings with Islamic didn't lead anywhere. We had those now for more than 1 year. What needs to be done is that when the IAEA team has the meetings, it's not just that Mr. Grossi meets the higher level people, but there is a technical team with him who talks with the technical people of Iran. And that is difficult to break that practice which has now been created in the last few years that this doesn't happen. We had it in 2000s and early 2010s. So that you talk the person who made those uranium particles, who machined the disks, who made the conversion. He's there, he was signing there in this meeting which Mr. Grossi attended in Isfahan for the Nuclear Technology Conference. So get those people together with the IAEA experts, real experts, guys who know the enrichment, guys who know metallurgy, guys who know the weaponization. Get them to talk about these topics. And then, last and not the least, it's not about those 2, 3, 4 sites. It's much wider. There are still sites which the IAEA has not visited, which were mentioned in the Amman program documentation hoisted by Israel from Tehran. Those installations ought to be visited to see what they have been doing, where is the equipment, where are the people, and what they have done since 2003. This is
Indeed.
what ought to be done this summer before it gets too late.
Very interesting indeed. I must indicate. So, in other words, Samhani and Fakhrizadeh are the nuclear equivalents to what Mohammad Javad Zarif and his smiling face were to Qasem Soleimani at the IRGC Quds Force, if I can establish some analogy to those two spheres. But let's ask then, Dr. Duran, I tried to comprehend a report that was made before this Board of Governors meeting of the United States effectively frustrating the United Kingdom, France, and Germany coming together, trying to formulate some censor that would be acceptable for Russia and China, if I may add, and the Americans were the ones to try and block it. What am I missing here?
See, God does this to you. If you stay in this business long enough, you see everything. And then you realize that all the things that you thought were fixed in the world are not fixed, and it's all kind of in flux all the time. So yes, we used to think that America was the hardliner on the Iran nuclear question, and the Europeans were the ones without any spine. And now we see it's all being reversed. The key issue here is that if you look at it from the point of view of Joe Biden, he's got one date that's fixed in his mind, and that's Election Day in November. And he wants a quiet Middle East for Election Day. And when he looks at what all of the problems in the Middle East are all connected, and they all go back to Iran. So he wants quiet in Gaza to bring quiet to Lebanon, because that will bring quiet to Iran. Anywhere he has to escalate, and when I say escalate, I'm not just talking about military escalation. If the only way he's going to get the Iranians to change their course on the nuclear file is by putting pressure on them. If he puts economic pressure on them, he starts shutting down their oil sales to China. That they're going to respond how? They're going to respond with military escalation through their proxies across the region, which means the United States will have to escalate. So all across the region, he just sees minefields that lead to military escalation. And he doesn't want to put pressure on them in the IAEA, because that will lead to it will lead us down a path of confrontation that will lead to military escalation, that will lead to conflict in the Middle East before the presidential election. So it's really as simple as that. There are also the White House has concepts of regional order that it is working from that go beyond the political. If they believe that engagement of Iran diplomatically is the best way to manage the competition with Iran. I personally don't agree with that view, but that is what they believe. It's a deep-seated belief, and there's nothing that we're going to say that's going to change them from seeing that. If I could just switch topics for 1 second, I wanted to give just a quick two-finger response to something that General Kuperwasser said.
Very briefly, please.
I thought it was so important when he said that all Israelis want to destroy Hamas. It's not just Prime Minister Netanyahu. It's important to emphasize that here, Jonathan, because I listened to the BBC, I listened to a lot of the European reports, and they're taking their cues from the European foreign ministries, from the State Department, and from President Biden himself, who basically said in his statement on Friday that he talked about elements in the governing coalition in Israel are against this deal, and he's referring obviously to Smotrich and Ben Gvir. So in his mind, and I believe that the president believes this, the opposition to the deal that he's offering is coming from the Israeli extreme right, from the religious right. And it's just false. The Israeli public as a whole wants to destroy Hamas. And this is a mistake of analysis that the administration is making, because, first of all, they themselves, the senior people in the Biden administration, they loathe Prime Minister Netanyahu. He's illegitimate in their eyes. And then every Israeli that they talk to, whether it's from the opposition or from the among more conservative Israelis like Gidon Saar or Avigdor Lieberman, they all loathe Prime Minister Netanyahu. So they start to believe that there's an opportunity to move Netanyahu aside and then get to this sane pathway, what are they calling it, roadmap to peace that they have in their mind. But it's all based on a fundamental misunderstanding of Hamas's power, Iran's power, and the Israeli public opinion.
Thank you, Dr. Duran. Very insightful indeed. General Kupelwasser, I'd like to point out something that I think should be highlighted, and Dr. Heinonen mentioned that, and justifiably so. That is that Iran has nuclear installations that the international community has not received access to at a time when the IAEA is also still investigating, with not a lot of success, the outstanding probes into nuclear particles that were uncovered in undeclared locations throughout Iran, and which the Iranians have yet to provide any answers about. What if Iran now goes nuclear, tests a nuclear warhead in the next month or two? What can the world do, and are we expected to see such a scenario evolve into reality?
Well, I think that the problem here is that with this show of weakness of the United States and the hovering potential of Trump victory in the elections, and the fact that what happened in mid-April showed that Iran is weaker than it thought and more vulnerable than it thought, but at the same time showed how dangerous it is. It is a potential way of thinking for the Iranians to say, okay, if this is the situation, what we need to do is to rush to nuclear capability or nuclear bomb as soon as possible before Trump arrives. And that is what is the major concern of Israel should be, and of the United States, of everybody, that the Iranians are going to rush to a bomb. And I don't think that they can do it within a month, but the fact that we don't know the answers to all these questions, God knows what happened with the uranium that was worked out 20 years ago by the Iranians without declaring anything about it. God knows where it is, what for, and so on and so forth. Whether there were conducted any kind of tests with it in order to solve the problems that might occur on the way to a bomb for the Iranians. They definitely have enough fissile material. That's not a problem at all. They have enough fissile material for 3 to 4 bombs now, within a month, and that's the situation we have to worry about. And what needs to be done is to adopt a very decisive and threatening position vis-a-vis Iran, and tell them, listen, don't even think about it. And the best thing for you to do is to go back and get rid of the highly enriched uranium that you have. Otherwise, something's going to happen. And I think what we have accomplished in mid-April is to say to the Iranians, look, there is a credible military option. The fact is that somebody attacked certain facilities in Iran, and the Iranians were not able to do anything about it. So there is a credible military option. What is lacking is economic sanctions. And unfortunately, the Americans are trying to prevent that from happening for the good reasons, in their view, that Dr. Duran mentioned.
Well, that's all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank General Kupelwasser, Dr. Heinonen, and Dr. Duran for your splendid insights. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Have a good evening.